It was late evening in a small town on the edge of the highway. The neon signs of a dimly lit bar flickered in the darkness, drawing in travelers, bikers, and locals alike. Inside, the air was thick with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of grilled food. A jukebox in the corner played a rock tune, and people were chatting loudly over it. At the far end of the bar stood a young waitress named Emily. She was in her early 20s, slim and graceful, with a smile that managed to stay warm even after hours of serving impatient customers. Her hands moved quickly, balancing trays and taking orders, yet her eyes showed signs of fatigue. Life hadn't been easy for Emily, but she carried herself with quiet strength. That night, the doors swung open with a creak, and in walked a group of bikers. They were loud, rough-looking, and carried an intimidating presence. Their leather jackets bore patches of their club, and their boots thudded against the wooden floor. People turned their heads as the men walked in, laughing boisterously and demanding attention without a word. The leader of the group, a tall man with a scruffy beard and piercing eyes, made his way to the counter. His name was Vince, known among the locals as someone you didn't want to mess with. He carried himself with arrogance, like the entire place belonged to him the moment he stepped inside. Emily walked over to their table, holding her notepad. Despite their intimidating demeanor, she greeted them with a polite smile. "Good evening, what can I get you?" Vince leaned back in his chair, looking her up and down in a way that made a few nearby customers shift uncomfortably. A smirk spread across his face as he ordered, his tone filled with mockery. "We'll take a round of beers, sweetheart. And make it quick, yeah." Emily nodded, jotting it down without reacting to his tone. She had dealt with men like him before. They thrived on attention, and she had learned that the best response was calm professionalism. She turned to walk away, but Vince's eyes followed her every move. Minutes later, Emily returned with a tray of cold beers. She carefully placed them on the table, her smile never faltering. But as she did, Vince suddenly reached out and tugged at her arm, pulling her closer. The suddenness of it startled her, and a hush fell over the nearby tables. "Hey, sweetheart," Vince said in a mocking drawl, "don't walk away so fast. We were just getting to know you." Emily tried to pull her arm back gently, saying softly, "Please, sir, I have other tables to serve." But Vince wasn't listening. His ego swelled at the attention of his buddies who were now laughing at the scene. And then, without warning, he reached out with his other hand and ripped at the neckline of Emily's shirt. The sound of fabric tearing echoed through the bar, followed by a gasp that spread across the room. For a moment, time froze. The laughter died. The music from the jukebox seemed distant. Everyone's eyes were on Emily, who stood frozen in shock, clutching at her torn shirt. But what Vince saw when the fabric ripped wiped the smirk right off his face. Beneath the torn material was not what he expected. Instead of embarrassment, there was something that made his jaw drop. On Emily's chest, partly covered by a thin undershirt, was a large, faded scar that stretched across her skin. It was jagged and raw, a painful reminder of something she had endured in the past. The room fell silent, as though the scar itself had stolen the air from the bar. Emily's hands trembled as she tried to cover herself, but her eyes glistened, not with shame, but with the weight of memories. Vince stepped back, his hand frozen midair, as if he had touched something sacred he had no right to disturb. The silence was unbearable. Finally, a voice from the corner of the bar broke it. An older man, sitting alone with his drink, spoke up. "You fool," he said firmly, "do you even know what you've just done?" Vince turned, startled by the sudden words. The man rose from his chair, his eyes fixed on Emily. His face was weathered, his hair streaked with gray, but his voice carried strength. "That scar," he continued, "is not something to laugh at or humiliate. Do you know where she got it?" Emily's eyes widened. She had never wanted her story to come out this way, not in front of a crowd. But the older man continued, his words heavy with emotion. "This young woman saved lives. That scar, it's from the fire 2 years ago." Gasps echoed around the room again. Some of the locals nodded, remembering the tragedy that had nearly destroyed the town's orphanage. The old man's voice trembled as he went on. "She ran into the flames when everyone else was too afraid. Children were trapped inside, crying for help. She didn't think twice. She pulled them out one by one, burning herself in the process. That scar, that's her badge of courage." All eyes turned to Emily, who stood silently, tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. She hadn't wanted recognition, she hadn't wanted pity. She had simply done what she thought was right. Vince's face turned pale. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced with shame. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came. His friends, once laughing, now looked at him with disgust. The bar owner, a stout man with a kind face, stepped forward and placed a protective arm around Emily. His voice was stern as he addressed Vince. "You crossed the line tonight. Get out." Vince tried to protest, but the bar owner's eyes left no room for argument. The silence of the crowd pressed against him like a weight. Finally, with his head low and his pride shattered, Vince turned and left the bar, his gang trailing behind him. The door slammed shut, and the tension began to ease. Customers slowly returned to their seats, whispering to each other about what they had just witnessed. But many couldn't take their eyes off Emily. The bar owner gently guided her to the back, but before she disappeared, the older man stepped forward again. His voice was softer now, filled with respect. "You don't need to hide that scar, miss. That scar tells a story more powerful than any words. Don't ever let anyone make you feel ashamed of it." Emily's lips curved into a small, grateful smile. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of her past lighten, as though sharing her truth had freed her from the burden of secrecy. The bar erupted into applause, not for the spectacle, but for Emily. For her courage, for her strength, for the reminder that true beauty lies not in perfection, but in resilience. And that night, every person who witnessed the scene left with something heavy on their minds. The arrogant biker who had tried to humiliate a young woman had been humiliated himself, not by force, but by truth. Days later, the story spread through town. People spoke of Emily with admiration, and the bar became known not just as a place for drinks, but as the place where the truth about a local hero had come out. As for Emily, she continued working with the same smile she had always worn, but now, when people looked at her, they didn't just see a waitress. They saw the woman who had risked her life to save others. And as for Vince, he never dared to set foot in that bar again. The shame of that night followed him like a shadow, a constant reminder of the moment his arrogance was shattered by a scar that told a story of true bravery. The narrator's voice softens as the screen begins to fade out. This story reminds us of something powerful. We never know what battles others have fought, what scars they carry, or what pain lies behind their smiles. Kindness costs nothing, but cruelty can cost us everything. Always think before you judge, before you laugh, before you act. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers with the echo of applause and the image of Emily's quiet but unbreakable strength.